Reading with your kids.
Hola, niho, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni muli wanji, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted and so very honored that you join us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell all your family and friends about the podcast, and please subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Good Pods, wherever you find your podcasts. Our guest today is Amy Schwartz. She'll be here to celebrate the reissue of her debut picture book, Bea and Mr Jones. Before I invite Amy into the studio, we want to let you know that this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by What Can I Be? STEM Careers from A to Z, written by Tiffany Teachy. This is an inspiring, easy-to-read alphabet picture book that teaches our next generation about science, technology, engineering, and math careers. This book provides colorful illustrations of 6 diverse children representing various STEM careers: astronauts, doctors, scientists, engineers, helping kids ages 5 to 8 see themselves in one of these amazing and exciting STEM careers, and motivates them to shape their future through STEM. Tiffany Teacher is a senior mechanical engineer, STEM advocate, professional speaker, and international best-selling author of the children's book, What Can I Be? STEM Careers from A to Z. Be sure to get your copy today. This episode of the podcast is also brought to you by Skipper, Friend or Foe, a distracting mystery within life's traumatic events. Michael is leading what seems to be a pretty normal life for a happy 12-year-old boy. And then the unthinkable happens. His mom gets cancer. Michael's dad takes a job out of town because the treatments are so costly. It's the only way they can afford her treatment. Suddenly, Michael is no longer a carefree kid, but his mom's caretaker. When a new friend convinces Michael to follow a mysterious adventure, Michael learns that it's not all up to him to take care of his mom. It's okay to have fun, even through some of life's toughest issues. It is a really powerful and moving book that you would love to read with your tweens and teens. Skipper, Friend or Foe, written by Kelly Sanchez. It's a Reading with Your Kids certified great read. Join us right now from Brooklyn and New York City. Our guest today is here to celebrate the reissue of her classic picture book. It's called Bea and Mr Jones. Please welcome to the show, Amy Schwartz. Hey, Amy, how are you?
Oh, I'm good. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm delighted to have you on the show. What an exciting time to have a book reissued after delighting so many people over the years.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. What was it like when you heard the word that the folks at your publishers wanted to reissue this book?
Oh, I was very happy. I mean, it's really great. The editor, I know she really liked this book as a child. And so I think it was her personal connection and personal decision to reissue it. And I'm just delighted. It's just wonderful.
Yeah. And it was first published 40 years ago, am I right?
That's correct, yes.
Wow. One of the things that's just so amazing about picture books is that we talk about podcasts being evergreen and that it's something that people can listen to anytime, but there haven't been any podcasts that have lasted 40 years. It's amazing that a picture book that resonated to your editor 40 years ago is still resonating with families and young kids today.
Yes, very nice.
Yeah. So tell us about the book, please.
Well, Bea and Mr Jones, it's a story about a kindergartner and her father. Bea is a kindergartner and her father, Mr. Jones, is an advertising executive, and they're both not happy in their roles. Bea is tired of playing beanbag games and the colored lollipop game and sitting on that green rug all day. And her father is tired of running for the train and working so hard and laughing at the boss's jokes all day. So they decide that they're going to switch. And Bea puts on her father's coat and tie. Her father puts on his sneakers and turns cartwheels. And they both go to their new school and place of employment with notes. And they're both wildly successful in their new roles. Mr. Jones rapidly becomes a teacher's pet. He's a whiz at the colored lollipop game. Bea really likes the boss's jokes. And best of all, she comes up with a slogan to retain the Crumbly Crackers account at the last minute, and she's given a promotion. And this book is a little unusual because the two characters just continue on in their new roles. It's not like, oh, they realize the value of their old life, blah, blah, blah. So that's the book.
Yeah, neat. I'm curious, when you made that decision to not do we're going to go back to our roles and live happily ever after, did you already have the book, the story going in that direction, and then decided, no, I'm going to scrap, I'm going to write a new ending?
Oh, no. This is how I wrote it. And I was just concerned. I didn't know if a publishing house would be interested. I wrote it in a class, in a children's book class. So I asked my teacher's advice, and he said, oh, no, you can keep this ending. And one publisher was interested in the book, but did ask me to change the ending. And I said no, sort of going on my teacher's confidence in this ending. And then I did find a publisher who took it as is. And I was very, very pleased.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Was there something in particular that, other than the teacher's confidence in you, that made you feel, no, I want to keep this ending. This is really important to me?
I guess it was a feeling I had. It was just, this is what I want to do. And the fact that, again, I had this, the teacher's, confidence that this was a good ending. So that was that. Yeah. I just knew that this was my book.
Yeah. Well, I certainly understand why the book has made children and parents smile and laugh so much over the years, because it's kind of like a universal kind of dilemma. I can see families loving this 40 years from now, 140 years from now. We're always going to, people are always going to be somewhat dissatisfied with what they perceive as their mundane life.
Yeah, and you can always dream and always think about something else. So it's really more a book. I'd like to emphasize the characters' happiness in their new roles rather than their dissatisfaction. I know when I was a kid, it was quite a mystery to me what my parents did all day. My mother was a chemistry professor, and sometimes she would talk about working in the laboratory. And of course, I knew the word lavatory, which caused some confusion. And I wrote this book shortly after I'd moved to New York. And it was I lived in the Bay Area in California, and it was a very different atmosphere, living in New York City. And I saw these men, and at that time, men would wear suits and carry briefcases. And where were they going that was so important? What were they doing? So I do think that's something kids think about. What are other people doing? And this was sort of my fantasy about that as well.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things that surprised me when my now adult kids were younger. I had a very different job. I perform educational magic shows at schools around the country, and my kids would travel with me very often, so they knew what I was doing. My wife was a teacher for 34 years, so they knew what my wife was doing. But I was really surprised to find out how many of my kids' friends had no idea
Right.
what their parents did. I mean, they couldn't even put a name as to what job they did.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That was really strange.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I know when my son was in high school, and when the kids are applying to college, they're supposed to know what they want to do. And I thought, why don't the schools, I think maybe perhaps at an older age, bring people in, talk more about what these careers really are? Because my son had no clue. He had interests, but I didn't know about most professions, and he certainly didn't. So I do think it's something that, in an age-appropriate way that kids could be more exposed to.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, you bring up a really good point, because I think career day kind of ends when kids are in kindergarten and first grade. They get their parents to come in, and this is what I do, and then that's it. And then we don't talk about it again until we're telling our 18-year-olds they need to make a decision as to whether or not to take out a $75,000 a year student loan or $50,000 or what.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow. So you've been in the children's literature world for a long time. What kind of changes have you noticed in the field?
Well, many fewer publishers than there used to be as companies consolidate. Editors have to work harder and harder as what they're expected to do increases. I still work with paint and pen on paper, and I know that's very old-fashioned now. Certainly, I think most illustrators, certainly not all illustrators, but probably majority work digitally. Mm-hmm. And of course, in recent years, there's been more and more of I don't know what word to use, more than an attempt, but publishers acting to both have a more diverse staff and also publish more diverse books. Mm-hmm. And that's wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that certainly is a change that we've celebrated a lot here on the podcast. Publishers more attuned to the fact that books can and should be windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors, and very aware of how important it is for every kid to see themselves represented in the pages of books. Yeah. What was the latest new book that you've had published?
Let me see. I have to think for a minute. I believe it was, my last book was a story called 13 Stories About Harris, which is about a little boy, I see him living in Brooklyn, and his best friend Ayanna, and just different events from their daily life. And this fall, I have a book coming out, a companion book called 13 Stories About Ayanna, where she gets to be the main character and Harris is her sidekick. So I believe that was my latest book.
Wonderful. Hey, isn't that wonderful? What a wonderful problem to have. I know authors listening to the podcast would be very jealous, thinking, she's had so many books published, she can't remember the last one.
I believe it's more my aging memory, but we can think of it that way.
I always like to look at the positive in life.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
What is it? Where do you find your inspiration? We've had a number of authors come on the show telling us about where they find inspiration. You've written so many books. Is there a particular place or a particular way that you find inspiration and ideas?
Well, when really all of my books are rooted in my life experience. When I started writing, I mean, again, Bea and Mr Jones, it's not a literal, I didn't become an advertising executive, but again, it was, I'd come to New York and was being exposed to the business world and wondering about it and could I succeed? I bought my first suit, the day before I moved to New York. But other books are directly based on experiences I had as a child. And then when my son was born, I wrote a good number of books, based on his life, starting when he was 2 months old. And, eventually, obviously, he aged out of that, but I still work from what I remember from his childhood and from my childhood.
Yeah. I wonder, do you think that kids have changed over the decades that you've been writing?
Oh, gosh, that's a hard question. I don't really know how to answer that. I think as society's evolved and we change, that those different ideas get transmuted to our kids. I think the inner core of people doesn't change. But, what they're exposed to, what they experience, what the experience of their parents, the kinds of schools they go to, of course, that's going to have an effect on them. But inside, I think, things are the same.
Yeah. I'm looking at your website, and there's so many wonderful books and so much beautiful cover art. I'm curious, do you think of yourself as an author who illustrates or an illustrator who also writes?
Oh, gosh. I think of myself as someone who just does both. When I got started, I came here, thinking I would just be an illustrator. I had no intention of writing. I thought I couldn't write. And as I was taking my portfolio around, a number of editors suggested that I try writing something that, they had many excellent illustrators to choose from, but it was more difficult for them to find a manuscript they really liked. So that's when I wrote Bea and Mr Jones, and I've illustrated books by other authors. But gradually I did more writing, and the majority of my books became books that I wrote. Yeah. So I really enjoy that. And I enjoy the fact it's my personal victory of, yes, I can do this.
There you go. That's right. Yeah. And I'm interested because I am not a visual artist in any way. And my niece always reminds me that when she looks at some of the pictures that I take with my phone. But as you're writing, do the words come first, do the illustrations, or is it just happening at the same time?
The words come first. With me, I always feel like I have to have a complete manuscript. I, have friends where it's different, where it all comes about together, but I always start with a story, and then sometimes there's some difficulty. Who wrote this? Oh, I did. And how do I illustrate this? So I start with the words.
I'm wondering, is that you've told so many stories over the years. Is there any story that you haven't been able to tell yet that you're longing to tell? That there's something inside?
That's hard. This, I frankly, I don't know if I really see it in my future, but, my mother was an immigrant. She fled Nazi Germany in 1937. She was just a teenager, and she kept journals, and she kept a journal of her journey over here, and she translated it from German to English for us, for her daughters. So I'd love to have that become something in some way. I don't see that as a picture book, which I think is why I have not been able to do it. But I guess that's an unfulfilled dream.
Well, as you're sitting here, I just spoke with an author who just published a book for middle grade kids, so older kids, about a survivor, one of the twins who survived Auschwitz. And she wrote the book with that twin. And it's a really important story. And one of the things we talked about with that author is the fact that there are many people who don't know about the Holocaust, many people who deny it. And we can't forget the horror of the Holocaust. And I think that we need to tell these stories. And I think you could tell that story as a picture book. It would be difficult. It would be difficult, but I absolutely think you could tell that story as a graphic novel.
That's been suggested to me, but that's, gosh, it's hard enough for me to illustrate a 32-page picture book. And I think of all the work that graphic artists do, but who knows? Because again, I do find that sort of dreaming about something, sometimes that does become reality. It does point you in the right direction. If you just really want to do something and keep thinking about it, eventually you might find a way to do it. You might circle around and think of a new approach.
Yeah. I agree with you, but I also think in this case, the story may be calling out to you, saying, I need to be told.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Well, I'll keep my fingers crossed that you're going to find a way to tell that story, because it's so very important. Thank God that your mom was able to escape and come here so that she could enjoy the rest of her life and so that she could bring you into the world and you could bring all that happiness that you've brought to families.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Have you ever taken time to sit down and to, obviously you've thought that, wow, this is Bea and Mr. Jones. It's 40 years, have been 40 years of families. But have you ever taken the time to think about how many thousands or hundreds of thousands or even millions of families have sat down and cuddled together reading your books?
That's sort of hard to visualize and hard to think about. And, it makes me so happy when sometimes someone reaches out to me, either a friend or someone I don't know, to tell me, how much they enjoyed a book of mine or how it played a part in their life or their children's life. It's really wonderful. I think when I write, I think about a small audience. I used to think about, my my mom will get a kick out of this, or, someday my son will get a kick out of this. So I'm thinking of a small audience, but of course I'm thrilled and it makes me so happy when I hear about somebody outside of that circle who enjoyed a book.
That's wonderful. We do have a lot of authors who listen to the podcast. Any advice that you could share with those authors and aspiring authors?
Persevere. I think I'm a very dogged person, which I've only realized in retrospect. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really why I've, been able to do what I do, that I kept trying. Mm-hmm. I just kept trying. Yeah. And I think that's as important as talent or anything else.
Yeah.
And I got started taking a lot of classes because to get advice, be in that community, and that was very helpful to me. Mm-hmm. That's how I got started.
Yeah. So important to have a circle of friends and a circle of colleagues who can support you and give you advice, give you a little criticism when it's needed.
Yes.
Yeah. If there was one book, of course, you want everybody to check out Bea and Mr. Jones. But if there was one book of the collection of books that you've written that you would tell me, Jedley, you have to check this one book out.
Well, again, people ask, what's your favorite book that you've done? One of them is Bea and Mr. Jones. And maybe another one is the first book I wrote about my son, which is called A Teeny Tiny Baby. And I'm very fond of that. I put in, all my family members, and everything is true. So that book has a great deal of meaning to me.
Wonderful. Amy, where can people go to find out more about Bea and Mr. Jones and Teeny Tiny Baby and more about you?
Well, my website is, let me see if I can remember it, amyschwartzillustration.com.
Mm-hmm.
And so that has some information. And, I believe Googling will also get you more information about my books.
That's wonderful. We've had a really this has been such a fun time for me, Amy. Thank you so very much for being with us.
Well, thank you so much. It's just been lovely speaking with you.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guests will be Sarah Weeks and Joey Ellis. They'll be here to celebrate Blippo and Beep. It's a lot of fun. You don't want to miss it. Hey, speaking of not wanting to miss things, you absolutely don't want to miss our live appearance at the Buttonwood Park Zoo in beautiful New Bedford, Massachusetts. We'll be there celebrating episode number 1500 on August 6, 2020. Go on down. It's a fun day. Buttonwood Park Zoo is an absolutely beautiful zoo. It's a great place for your family. We'll be there. We'll have some magic. We'll be giving away books. We'll be interviewing local authors and maybe even you. We would love to see you there. August 6th, Buttonwood Park Zoo, reading with your kids live at the zoo. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we want to start by thanking our guest, Amy Schwartz. Please be sure to check out Bea and Mr. Jones. Also want to thank our sponsors, Tiffany Teachy, author of What Can I Be? STEM Careers from A to Z. And also Kelly Sanchez, author of Skipper, Friend or Foe, a distracting mystery within life's traumatic events. I want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Nicole Belcastro, Mirabella Q, Rain Pan. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.